afternoon and welcome to Capital Account. I'm Lauren Lister here in Washington, D.C. These are your headlines for May 14th, 2012. In the wake of the J.P. Morgan whale tale, Jamie Dimon appears on national network TV defending the bank and repudiating the notion that Wall Street is and has been bad.
I think that's not true. Not everyone on Wall Street was bad. Not all media is bad. I like you. You know, I trust you, actually.
Look at that. He's even trying to make amends with the media and industry he's criticized in the past. We will decode, don't you worry, the PR and tell you what the Jamie Dimon ego indicator may be telling us. This is critics are saying Dimon should go either from the board of the New York Fed or from the top spot at the bank. Meanwhile, in the Eurozone, more indication that debt junkies are unwilling to acknowledge reality. Greek elections have unveiled, for the first time, arguably, just how fragmented the society has become and how unpopular the bailout is beyond the riots we've seen. Politicians, though, they still can't cobble together a government in the country, and the question is how much more broadly will we see the same problems plague Europe's economies as others run up against debt, austerity, fake bailouts, and elections? And how many people officially have been convicted of crimes related to the 2008 financial crisis? Well, if you're looking for answers from officials, the U.S. Justice Department doesn't know because they don't track them. Why might that be? You know, it hasn't always been this way. They do track civil cases too, I'll have you know. We'll discuss it. Let's get to today's Capital Account. All right, it's Monday, so let's take stock, because what we're seeing across the Western world is exactly what happens when faith in the systems of governance and commerce are shaken to such a degree that the emerging cracks in the foundation appear too large and the holes too gaping to fix by traditional means. Nowhere, of course, is this more obvious than in Greece, where a system-wide reset seems the only realistic outcome at this point. The inability of politicians to form a viable government is really only the latest act in this national drama. Deposit and capital flight, a collapse in domestic investment, and a paralyzing debt burden have weighed on the Greek economy in the throes of a dark social depression unlike anything the country has seen in recent generations. And with similarly indebted neighbors facing bailouts or austerity, it's not hard to imagine a similar trajectory for other economies. Those pictures you see are from Spain. So as the cracks within Western societies and their economies grow larger and deeper, the divide between the real economy and the one inhabited by the financiers grows equally with it. Last week, let's bring it home, we learned that J.P. Morgan, the largest Wall Street bank to have emerged from the crisis of 2008, not only unscathed, but enriched and bigger than ever before, announced a whole of its own on its own balance sheet of more than $2 billion, expected to grow, possibly to another $1 billion, some say higher. But not to worry, because cracks on Wall Street can always be fixed with the glue of more easy money, deregulation, and of course, monopoly privilege. Holes can be filled with the endless support of central banks who stand ready to enrich our feudal banking oligopoly at the expense of the systems of government and commerce that built the same wealth that is now being extracted with an ease and efficiency reminiscent of an industrial assembly line. It's kind of the only thing reminiscent of that these days. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of America's largest bank by assets, again, made an appearance on Meet the Press this Sunday. Listen to what he had to say about the $2 billion loss that JP recorded from its risky bets. The loss that turned out not to be the tempest in the teapot that he had previously blown it off as. Take a listen.
It's a question of size. This is not a risk which is life-threatening to J.P. Morgan. This is a stupid thing that is, that we should never have done, but we're still going to earn a lot of money this quarter. So it isn't like
Don't you worry. Did you hear that? JP Morgan is still going to earn a lot of money this quarter. Banks are supposed to earn money by helping the economy grow. They make money from that growth. Making money while the rest of the economy suffers isn't earning money, it's extracting it, it's stealing it. And that's a theme we see on both sides of the Atlantic, from bank bailouts in the Eurozone, disguised as bailouts for societies, to the casino capitalism of Wall Street banks, disguised as legitimate business. This is just how a bank works. That's what Jamie Dimon wants you to think. We're going to see what Gerald Celente thinks, though. He's founder of Trends Research Institute and publisher of the Trends Journal, and a great antidote on a day like this to the PR coming from a too-big-to-fail bank like J.P. Morgan. Mr. Celente, Gerald Celente, thank you so much. Welcome back to Capital Account. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let's start with something actually from your Spring Trends Journal. It's a quote from Nomi Prince, who's also been a guest on this show, that says, "Never before has the world experienced such an epic government subsidization scheme to keep private sector gamblers gambling." And she's talking about a trend from the U.S. to Europe to next, she believes, Asia and Latin America. My question to you is, not only have the government the mechanisms of government really been hijacked in order to subsidize the gambling habits and the debt addictions of a new feudal class of banker, but the media, by and large, has painted these attempts as bailouts for the victims. So this may sound like a vague question, but let's just, ask broadly. How would you say this has been allowed to happen?
It's what we wrote back when Henry Paulson, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, was the head of the U.S. Treasury, the Treasury Secretary under Bush. And he devised the scheme of the bailouts, the too big to fails, with his TARP program. And at that time we sent out a trend alert: Wall Street has hijacked Washington. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. By definition, is called fascism. It's been a takeover. Look at the people who are in charge and who have been in charge, one after another. Whether it was, from the Goldman Sachs gang, the Merrill Lynch mob, the J.P. Morgan Chase crew, one after another, they all inhabit and inhibit the halls of Wall Street, of Washington, and it's a revolving door. Mm-hmm. There's no democracy in the United States. That's only for little kids. The only representation we get in this country from our senators and congressmen are the people that give them the most money and have the most power. So it's a complete takeover. And not only in the U.S., it's global. I mean, who's the head of the European Central Bank? Oh, Mario Draghi. Where's he from? Son of a gun. Wasn't he the vice chairman of the Goldman Sachs gang over in Europe? Oh, and how about that guy up in Italy, Mario three-card Monte? Oh, wasn't he the international advisor for the Goldman Sachs gang?
Yeah.
One after another, Lauren.
Yeah, the list goes on.
It's very simple.
Same thing as the technocrat in Greece that was appointed prime minister. Or again, he was a former central banker. The question, though, and I don't want to belabor this, but Gerald, sitting here 3 years after the financial crisis, after this malignant banking tumor built and brought down the economy, the worst that we've seen since the Great Depression, how are we sitting here watching Jamie Dimon on TV talk about making more money despite the fact that economies are doing horribly? Is there something in the human psyche, for example, that allows us to be manipulated to allow this kind of pillage right under our noses?
Well, it's all part of the distraction and the entertainment industrial complex. For example, we've just saw over the last few weeks Lloyd Blankfein, the fellow from Goldman Sachs who does, quote, God's work, and burnishing his image on CNBC and Bloomberg. And all the people do, whether it's a matter of taking you to war or robbing you of your savings, the people just sit back passively and let them get raped, whether it's figuratively or literally. And I don't know what it is with it. I had mentioned earlier to Dimitri, I came back from Berlin. Yeah. And it had to be the grandest city I've ever seen before it was bombed, in my vision of it. And much grander than Paris. I spent a lot of time there. And I said to myself, this is the land of, Beethoven, Bach, Goethe, Einstein, yeah, one after another. How could these people have let a two-bit freak like Hitler destroy their country? Oh, then people go, well, it was after the Treaty of Versailles. No, no, no. We had one over there in Italy, Mussolini, another two-bit freak. We had a two-bit freak here in America called George W. Bush. Take the people to war against Iraq for weapons of mass destruction that they didn't possess and ties to Al-Qaeda. What is it in the human spirit that allows people to listen to two-bit freaks like Jamie Dimon throw out his baloney that, you know, I didn't know the cause, there's no excuse for it, we didn't know it happened to $2 billion, just like a two-bit freak like John Corzine, who can't find the $1.6 billion. They let them get away with it, and I'll tell you why I believe it. Because people have lost their courage, their dignity, their respect, their integrity, and their passion, and they put up with a load of cheap baloney like guys like Jamie Dimon and that John Queen King, whoever he is, on Meet the Prostitutes, giving him these softball questions and letting him get away with it.
Well, let's listen to what you call this baloney coming from Jamie Dimon and what he gets away with before an interviewer like David Gregory. I want to play a little bit more about what he says about this screw-up that it's being characterized as, this $2 billion loss. Let's take a listen.
So banks either make loans or invest the money in securities. We have a huge securities portfolio. We're a big bank. In fact, the securities portfolio does have an unrealized gain of $8 billion. But in how we manage that portfolio, we did lose $2 billion trading.
So the thing about this is he just makes this sound like, oh, this is just normal banking business as usual. You know, what's left over from the deposits, we invest. But meanwhile, there are tons of reports that have come out from former executives of this unit, for example, saying he was turning this into a profit center, this CIO. He was encouraging huge speculative bets on riskier and riskier products like credit derivatives. Meanwhile, as they were making riskier bets, they were loosening some of the strict standards surrounding risk at the same time. So is this kind of the problem, that this is able to be characterized as, oh, this is just normal banking, this is how a bank works, don't worry about the details, those are complicated, those don't really matter though, this is just banking?
Let's make this really simple, Lauren. These are money junkies. They got a bad habit. They're gamblers. That's all this is. This isn't investment. I'm tired of hearing that word. They're gamblers. These aren't trades, they're gambles. And what happens is, when the money junkies make bad bets, they go to the government, which are their buddies, because it's one club, it's the mafia, the financial mafia. We, the people, have to bail them out. The FDIC, us, we're protecting guys like them, these banks that at one time were just commercial banks. They used to make loans, very vanilla business, and there was, you know, there was enough coverage there if they made a bad bet. They become investment banks are nothing more than casinos that gamble. So this is a lot of baloney. Again, it's just jive talk. And I love it, you know, when they ask the questions, how come no heads rolled on Wall Street? And Dimon says, oh, these bad actors should be punished. Bad actors? Can anybody say criminals?
Yeah.
No.
You're right. You're right. Nobody can say criminal. So how can you go after anybody for a crime if everybody is too afraid to call anybody a criminal or call anything fraud for that matter? When we get back, I want to ask you, what should be the fallout from this? We'll have more with Gerald Celente, founder of Trends Research Institute and publisher of the Trends Journal. Still ahead, as the Facebook IPO roadshow continues this week, a co-founder of the social network has changed his relationship status with the United States. We'll give you our 3 cents, but first, your closing market numbers.
What drives the world?
The fear-mongering used by politicians.
Who makes decisions?
Considerable breakthrough has already been made.
Who can you trust?
No one who is imbued with a global missionary zeal.
Where are we heading?
State-controlled capitalism is called fascism.
When nobody dares to ask, we do. RT, question more.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Tom Hartman. Welcome to The Big Picture.
Welcome to the Alona Show. We'll get the real headlines with none of the mercy. The problem with the mainstream media today is that they're completely disconnected from the viewers and from what actually matters to those viewers. And so that's why young people just don't watch TV anymore. If they want news, they go online and read it. But we're trying to take those stories that people actually care about and transfer them back to TV.
Welcome back. We're talking about Jamie Dimon and about how the same extractive principles can be seen from a too big to fail, huge risky trade made by JP Morgan, along with the terms of a bailout in Greece or another debt-strapped Eurozone country. Let's stick to Jamie Dimon, though, for a second, because I want to get to this great op-ed that one of our guests, Jim Rickards, wrote. It's out today. And he says if Jamie Dimon had an ounce of decency, he would resign now, not because his acts were criminal, but because he presides over a corrupt institution that extracts wealth from the many and directs it to the few with no value added, and not even a nod in the direction of the hardworking American victims of this scam. Now, he's talking about JP Morgan's earnings, which Jamie Dimon has been assuring everyone that this London whale trading loss is not life-threatening to. But he's saying, hey, these are a form of theft, those earnings to begin with, theft from savers, from retirees, pursuant to the Federal Reserve's zero interest rate policy. So let's bring Gerald back in, because I want to ask him about this notion, both the resignation and the unintended consequences of the Fed. Gerald, does Jim Rickards in this op-ed really get to the point? Is this the real issue, the kind of theft pursuant to the Federal Reserve's policies? And if Jamie Dimon had a shred of integrity, would he resign?
I mean, I can't speak for his integrity. All I could, by their deeds you shall know them. And when you listen to what he says, you know, it's just a lot of gibberish going back and forth as I've read over the transcripts of his Meet the Prostitute interview yesterday. So, you know, the whole thing is a criminal operation. The banks have been robbing the people in broad daylight, on and on, at every level they could pull it off, and it just keeps going. I love one of his quotes, by the way. He said that President Obama and President Bush, he admires them because they did things in the old-fashioned American way by helping out the system. Old-fashioned American way? How about this trying for the old-fashioned American way? In the old-fashioned American way, there was no such thing as too big to fail. In the old-fashioned American way, we the people are taught that if we fail at something, we go down. But not them. They stay up, and we have to prop them up.
And speaking of propping them up, you can't really talk about propping up the banks without talking about the Fed. Another analysis that has come out from critics post this whole Jamie Dimon scandal is people like Elliot Spitzer and Elizabeth Warren saying he shouldn't sit on the board of the New York Fed, he should resign. Well, I mean, the thing that comes to my mind is kind of like, duh, isn't that one of the problems to begin with, that you have someone like Jamie Dimon on the board of the New York Fed? Isn't this kind of the crux of the issue, Gerald, that when you're talking about the Federal Reserve, you're talking about a private-public partnership, or what some might call a cartel?
Well, it's like saying you shouldn't be sitting in on the inner circle of, you know, the mafia, the Gambino family. And that's all this is. It's theft. It's theft in front of everyone's eyes. It's not only happening here, it's happening all over the world. I mean, this is very simple. It's not complex. We know why it happened. There was a real estate bubble that was inflated by the Fed following the crash of the dot-com bubble in 2000. After 9/11 hit, they lowered interest rates to 46-year lows. There was a building boom in Ireland, a building boom in Spain, a building boom in Portugal, a building boom in the U.S. The banks kept loaning money to people they shouldn't have loaned it to, kept rebundling the money and making these gambling games, and the whole thing is collapsing. The Federal Reserve, again, you know, this is just a syndicate. It's a financial syndicate, and they whitewash it with respectability. This isn't the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. It's the International Mafia Federation. The whole thing is one big criminal operation, and everyone is afraid to call a spade a spade. Instead, we have to call them financial experts, investment wizards. Look how they bowed down to Jamie Dimon and said how brilliant he was. How brilliant he was. If you're on the inside of the game, you could be brilliant too.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the question becomes, and I know this is a big one, in this situation where we do have these actions going on and being supported, or at least kind of a narrative that says that it's acceptable by the press, by the public, how do you get banks back to their purpose where they are financing the economy and not gambling?
Oh, it's not going to change with the two-headed one-party system that we have in place. Look where they get their campaign financing from. Or I actually should use the proper language. Who gives them the bribes and payoffs to do what they want them to do? It's the big corporations, the big banks, big agriculture, big farmer. So nothing is going to change in this country. Not until, I believe, we have a direct democracy system where the people vote on major issues. If you were to put up bailing out the banks in a TARP program in 2008 and put it up for a referendum among the American people, it would have failed, hands down. But instead, they push it through. So nothing is going to change. And by the way, nothing is really going to change, I believe, until the people change. And when the people have the courage, dignity, respect, and integrity to live the lives that they believe they should be living, they won't take this baloney from clowns like these bankers and their two-bit shows that they put on TV.
Yeah, and it remains to be seen how that'll all shake out across the Western world, too, in countries like Greece and in other indebted nations. We didn't quite get to those because there was so much to get to with this whole Jamie Dimon fiasco. I also thought it was funny, him talking in the Meet the Press interview about how Washington and Wall Street needs to work together, like it's a good thing compared to the way that, you know, that you've painted it, that a lot of those issues I agree with you on. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a real pleasure. That was Gerald Celente, founder of Trends Research Institute and publisher of the Trends Journal. All right, before we go, let's wrap up with Loose Change. I have Dimitri and Shannon here to talk about a couple things that we could not overlook. So let's wrap up with this. How many executives have been convicted of criminal wrongdoing related to the financial crisis of 2008? Well, many people will probably just say zero if you're watching this show, but here's an answer given at last year's Oscars from the director of the Best Documentary winner, Inside Job.
3 years after a horrific financial crisis caused by massive fraud, not a single financial executive has gone to jail, and that's wrong.
Oh, and now, at 4 years after, the Justice Department doesn't even know the answer to how many criminal crimes have been prosecuted in the wake of the financial crisis related to them because they don't track them. What is that about? The SEC highlights the civil actions on their website, a total of 55 so far, and William Black points out in this Wall Street Journal article that they kept track of them during the savings and loan crisis, the aftermath of that.
Well, why didn't Donald Rumsfeld track civilian casualties in Iraq? Why didn't we track
Why
the
don't we
body
know
count?
civilian casualties from drone attacks post Donald Rumsfeld during Obama's administration?
It's the same thing. So they don't want to. They don't want to track it. They don't want to know because they don't want to do their job. So the American people have been left out to dry as far as the justice system is concerned. So I'm not surprised. They should be. They would not want people to know how incompetent and complicit, dare I say, they have been.
Yeah, and the list that they did end up issuing to the lawmaker that requested it included all of the people that have come after the financial crisis. You know, the Rajra Hoffmans and insider trading scandals, those kind of things. Not anything really from the financial crisis. Shannon, do you want to weigh in on why that might be?
I think Gerald just said it. They're working together. Wall Street and the government working together to all cover it up.
Look at you, Shannon. You're
fascism. It's because Gerald said it.
What a way Shannon has come from her days at the beginning of the show when she was a little more, you know, not so jaded. Okay, quickly before we go, the IPO roadshow for Facebook continues this week. Everybody knows about it, but did you catch this? A co-founder of the social network has changed his relationship status with the U.S.
Eduardo Saverin, one of the Facebook founders, renounced his U.S. citizenship some months back and is becoming a resident of Singapore. Saverin was born in Brazil, became an American citizen in 1998. He issued a statement saying his decision had nothing to do with the IPO.
Yeah, right. Imagine that. Right before he's about to become really, really, really rich, he ditches his U.S. passport for one in Singapore. This is the trend that we've seen where a record number of U.S. citizens have given up their citizenship. 1,780, at least.
He's not the first.
Last year.
He's not the first. He won't be the last. And America's become like a truck stop for people like him to go, to make their money, and then to leave, destitute. And not him destitute, obviously, right?
To leave the U.S. destitute as people come here to make their money, to get rich, to be successful, but then they're like, hey, we don't want to be taxed this way. We don't want to be taxed twice. We want more of our wealth. And so they peace out.
Right. I'm not going to blame him. I mean, he's gaming the system however best he can.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Right. Well, no, I'll hate certain players like Jamie Dimon, all right? Because they're pimps in this game. But so this is something that we see more and more, and it's not just people that are very wealthy like him. It's other people that want to get out of the U.S. while they still can, while they've made some money playing the game, because the rules get changed halfway down the river.
Or you don't know what the rules are going to be. Well, that's what you're saying.
Because the guy changing the rules has got a bet on the other side, and he's making money every time he changes the rules, all right? And people that I'm talking about are people like Jamie Dimon, Lloyd Blankfein, all these too big to fail CEOs, all right? Then they go do their little meet the prostitute, as Gerald Celente interviews, and they whitewash, they wash their hands clean of any guilt or anything else, and then they have their accounts, you know, in Singapore or wherever else. So Switzerland's been decimated, so
yeah, so you gotta go elsewhere. You gotta go elsewhere.
That's for small timers now, not the big boys.
This represents the new generation. That's where we'll leave it. That's all we have time for. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Lauren Lister and give us feedback at youtube.com/CapitalAccount. But for now, from everyone here, thanks for watching and have a great night.